So, hello, my sunshines, and welcome to episode 13 of your session with Dr. Deborah Brown. That's me. And today we're going to talk about something that's got the world buzzing. And I love this. I love being able to give a mental health perspective on a topic that a lot of people have questions about. Because I know when there's something out there that I don't understand, I want a trusted voice. I want somebody who knows a few things to tell me about it. And I don't know a lot about AI, but I do know a lot about the impact of it and what I think possibly the dangers could be. So I want to talk today about what it is and give some definitions for people who don't completely understand it. And I want to talk about how to use it safely and in a way that's not negative, and sort of the pluses and minuses, and sort of a cautionary tale of what could happen if you really are not paying attention and you get involved with AI at a level that's unhealthy for you. So, we're going to start with why, right? Why are we talking about this? Well, I had a really interesting conversation with my son who's 25 and is, in that age where you're much more likely to adapt to new technology. And even he kind of sent me an article and said, "Mom, this is wild." And the article was about what people are using things like ChatGPT and AI for. And the main reasons, and I'm going to read them to you, that people are using it are fascinating. It's not what you think. They're not just asking about the weather. So, the very first main reason that people are using it is therapy and companionship. That was very disturbing to him and to me. Um, because not because that's my job and I don't want my job taken by a machine, not at all. It's because therapy and companionship coming from a machine sounds a little bit scary, a little bit science fiction, right? Number two reason, another number two use of AI is organize my life. Number three, find my purpose. That one is horrifying. And number four, enhance learning. So people are using AI for therapy and companionship. They're using it to organize their lives. They're using it to find purpose and to learn things. All of that's really good stuff. Should we be getting it from AI or from other humans? So, all of this is about going where the buzz is and going where the fear is and the curiosity, because obviously this is a real thing. Obviously, people are using it for all kinds of purposes. So, let's get into it and explore. So, first of all, I want to demystify what AI is and make sure that it's not an unknown to any of us. It's obviously being integrated into all parts of our lives in different ways. So, I want to make sure you understand completely what it is. So, we're going to explain that. I also want to talk about healthy versus unhealthy uses. So, here we go. So, I always start from the basis of what are my patients asking me? What am I hearing out there? What are people concerned about? And I'm hearing a lot of just sort of people not really understanding what it is. Well, it's harmless, right? Or this is helping me, or it gives me ideas, or am I talking to it too much? That's the one that worries me is if you are spending hours talking to ChatGPT and asking it questions, should we instead be doing that with a human? That is a concern from my perspective. A lot of people fear about AI and society or the machines taking over, right? We're not going to get too deep into that because I don't know the exact answer to that question. But I think a lot of people have fears of what they don't understand. So that's why I want to start with talking about what it really is. So AI is artificial intelligence. It's created. It is made by man, but utilizes machine. So artificial intelligence really just generates content based on a database. So any AI that you're using is looking through the internet and the universe and finding all of the facts, sort of like a big encyclopedia. But the problem is encyclopedias are usually researched and pretty accurate. The internet is not all entirely accurate. So it's searching the database for answers for you, but it's not always finding the truth, but it's still spitting it all back to you. So we really want to think about the two different types of AI for the purposes of this conversation. There's generative AI and narrow AI. Why this is important is because there are different types of things that do different things. Narrow AI, it's things like Alexa or Siri or what's another one? Google Assistant, self-driving cars, facial recognition. These are all narrow AI, which really just means they are learning how to do something based on patterns and they're assisting you. So these are pretty simple and actually pretty helpful. Alexa, what's the weather today, right? These are all sort of cool things that make our lives better. We're not relying on these things to solve our problems or our feelings, but they're really more things that are assistants. These are things that make life better. I don't know about you, but it's really nice being able to ask a random question of Alexa when you have it. Now, a lot of people have a lot of fears about is she listening and all of that. Not going to get into that today. But these things perform specified tasks and make our life easier. They're not really considered invasive, and they're actually called by some as weak AI. So those are not the ones we're going to focus too much on today. We're going to talk more about generative AI. This is where it is actually building on itself all the time. It is growing more and more knowledge, and it's learning to adapt to you when you're using it. So examples of this are the biggest one is Chat GPT. A lot of people are talking about that. It's an AI chatbot. Alexa Plus is a new one. There's Music LM that creates music, Alpha Code that does coding, and something called Midjourney that creates art. There are several varieties of all of those out there. Now, these are interesting because they can produce art, they can produce poetry, they can create technical visualizations of things. They can be used to create content, translate, and also do customer service. So on the surface, these sound like really good things, and these could be things that could be really helpful to us. But my cautionary moment here is that anything that replaces human contact or human creativity, we need to really think about how we incorporate that into our lives because there are probably negatives to that as well. So the interesting thing about my perspective, and this is a disclaimer, is I'm Gen X, right? Some of us in Gen X are adapters of all of this stuff eagerly and excitedly. And some of us, like me, are late adapters because we want to make sure, not because we're old fuddy-duddies or that we don't like technology, but I think we're just a little more careful because we didn't grow up with it, some of us. And those of us who didn't grow up with all of the technology tend to be a little more skeptical when something new comes out. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Sometimes younger people will give older people grief and say, oh, they're not up with the times or they're not using these great new tools. But I think inherently some of us are a little more skeptical because it wasn't part of our lives. Some of us didn't start even touching computers until we were young adults. So it's this perspective is maybe that Gen X perspective, but it's also the perspective of someone who understands the value of connection. So when I'm talking about all this stuff, you're always going to get that lens, and I think it's important to say that, but I think we should all be initially skeptical. This is a very big change that's happening and a very new thing that's happening, and I think we just have to keep our eyes open and pay attention. So, if all of that is sort of what's new right now, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So, I went on and I installed ChatGPT. It's like, what is the hubbub all about? And interestingly enough, the first thing that came up is this, and I'm going to read it to you. This is the very first thing. ChatGPT can be inaccurate. ChatGPT may provide inaccurate info about people, places, or facts. That was the first thing that came on the screen. Now, if you walked into, your pharmacist and you saw that message that said, we may give you the wrong information, you'd be a little hesitant to use that pharmacist or you'd be super careful, right? If you walked into your doctor's office and they said right away, we may give you the wrong information, you're going to be careful about it. That's all I'm asking you to do is be careful. So Chat GPT is a big one right now because a lot of people are using it for things like therapy for what do I wear today? Give me something inspirational. So we're going to kind of use ChatGPT as a big part of this conversation today. So my message is don't trust it entirely, but let's explore. So what it does is it generates text based on the prompts that you give. But what I want you to realize is ChatGPT eventually shapes its answers to you, to your tone. It learns about who you are and what you want to hear, and it gives it to you. Because the idea is that it wants you to use it a lot and it wants you to keep using it. So because of that, it's going to customize what it gives you. Just like when you're on social media and your feed gets sort of personalized to what you've been looking at. ChatGPT does that. So if you see the danger of that when you talk about serious topics, is it's going to tell you what you want to hear in a way that you want to hear it, but it might not be the best information. Think of it as, a friend giving you advice. You'll take it or leave it, but you still will process it through what you believe. That's what I want you to do. So it basically Google searches information for you. You tell me about how to talk to my father about XYZ. And it Google searches all of the best outcomes or the best ideas and then condenses them into what it wants you to hear or what it thinks you want to hear. And it was interesting. I was reading through a lot of some of what people had found on there. And there was a story about a woman overseas, and this wasn't ChatGPT, it was a similar AI chatbot. And her husband was spending hours and hours at night, every night, just talking to the thing. And she really was struggling with it. And he ended up ending his life. And when she went back and she kind of analyzed what was happening there, is he was talking to the chatbot about suicide and he was asking for ideas and it was providing them. And I saw the screenshot and it was dreadful. It listed all of the ways that you could end your life. So that's the danger, right? Most of us who are in a real good space are going to say, what should we wear today to feel powerful? And that's cool and awesome. But somebody who's either young or struggling with mental illness, going to something like that for an answer is a very dangerous proposition. Now, my understanding is they've done a lot of changes since then, and there are a lot more safeguards in these things. But I still don't like the idea of inaccurate information, especially if you're having a really hard day. You need a human for that. So basically, it is always on your side. So it was really interesting. I saw another one where a woman had written something about feeling very alone and she wanted somebody to talk to. And instead of instructing her to go out and build connection with other people, it basically had a whole conversation as if it were a person and then said at the end, remember, you're not alone. I'm here, is what it was basically saying. And what would happen if you came to me and said, I'm feeling very alone? I might say, sure, you're not alone, I'm here. But I would also instruct you to make sure that you're out there making connections to other humans. Not really seeing that here. So what's the danger, right? The danger is that we can't tell the difference if we're in this long enough between what is real and what is not. And that might sound a little strange, right? We know what's real and what is not. But what about when you're really not feeling well? What if you're really not in a good space? It's kind of hard to know the difference between what you really need and something that's just filling the void for a moment. So I'm going to read you a poem that I found that I think is really good for kind of explaining these differences. It's called The Digital Divide. In realms of pixels where identities gleam, a persona crafted a digital dream, but real life shadows where feelings reside, a tapestry woven, a life that can't hide. The online hero, bold and bright, a curated facade bathed in screen light. But flesh and bone, within perfection's deep, where vulnerabilities quietly sleep. The virtual avatar is sculpted grace, a filtered reflection in time and space, while real life struggles, a silent refrain, human complexity etched in the rain. The curated collection, a vibrant display, while real life ties can fade and decay. The digital echo, a fleeting embrace, while real life warmth finds its own space. The online persona, a sculpted art, a world apart from the beating heart. But real life moments, a raw and true art, a tapestry woven right from the start. So navigate wisely the digital stream, where the curated world can eclipse a dream. But remember the essence, the human core, the real life tapestry forevermore. And I really like that poem because I think it talks about not just the idea of what is real and what is not, but it's also about sort of those images that we create on social media and through technology that don't really reflect our humanity. Being real is more than what we portray on our face. Being real is all of the experiences that we have, real life experiences with real life humans. Now, I'm going to tell you something about that poem that's going to really surprise you. I went online, as I do sometimes, and said, "Give me a poem about technology." And that poem popped up. And it was beautiful. And I thought, well, that's perfect. And I was trying to look for the author and I couldn't find it. And then I saw a little thing on top that said, generated by AI. Now, you thought that was a person, didn't you? I did. And the interesting part was I hit the button again and it kept giving me another poem and another poem. And I hit the button 6 times and got different versions of that poem. And okay, is that great? Sure, I had a really good poem to read you, but was that generated from human experience? Maybe it mined all of the poetry that was out there. It even provided connections to similar poems that were written by people. But you are the only one that can decide if that's good or bad. My opinion is I want real life experience. I want real life connection. And I don't want something generated from what is basically a digital encyclopedia. So I think that the reason that people like AI is because you can ask it anything. And what is the thing that most of us tend to fear in life? I have learned this: difficult conversations, talking about how we feel, asking a hard question, wanting to know something that might feel embarrassing. Well, you can ask ChatGPT anything, and it's not going to judge you. It's not going to look at you differently, and it's going to give you an answer. So maybe that's a good thing. But there are lots of answers. I bet if you sat in a room with the 5 closest people to you and asked them a question, they might all have different answers. And what we're supposed to do as humans, as healthy humans, is take all the data around us from people and synthesize it into what we believe. So if I say to my group, should I change my job? And all 5 of them give me a different answer. Then I have to sit with all of those answers and all the credibility of those people and decide what it is that I want to do. Not one voice that I hear or see on a screen, but the real people that know me and are looking out for me and not just generating a response. Do you see the danger there? Is if you get so connected to that response, you forget about all the other ones. And there's a movie that I loved, and maybe you guys have seen this. It's called Her, and Joaquin Phoenix stars in it. And it's sort of a Siri like voice that he begins to talk to, and he falls in love with her, and his whole life centers around her. And the tragic part of that movie is that we all know that could happen for real. It seemed absurd at the time they did it, and they did it, with the idea that it was kind of absurd. But then as you're in the movie, you see how easy it is to fall in love with somebody who says all the right things and gives you everything you want. and has no other job but to please you. That's not real connection. That's not real sharing. But in the movie, what you have to come away with is the idea that if you invest in the wrong thing, you miss out on the real thing, which is the real connection. Interestingly enough, when you see all of those things where they ask people in their 90s, what was the thing you regret? Or what was the thing that was most important? What was the meaning of life? And they almost always say the same thing. They don't say money or my job. They say connection, the connections that we build with other people, the relationships that we build. So AI is not a relationship, but it is a type of support. Do you see the difference? You got to make sure you hold on to that. So, does it replace therapy? There's the big question, right? Am I going to be out of a job? The answer is, of course not. I think we can all say that that's probably not reality, but that is the number one use, therapy and companionship. Now, we could think of all the reasons why. Is therapy's hard to get to? Therapy costs money. Therapy involves sharing with another human. There it is. Um, it's a lot easier to talk to a screen than it is to talk to a human. So, is it going to replace us? No, because the whole point of therapy is that we teach you how to be in a room with another person and build connection. Now, that might sound very simplistic, right? Of course, I know how to have connection. I have people in my life, but we hold boundaries. We reflect back what we hear from you. We listen and we develop a relationship based on human connection. And there is no humanity behind Chat GPT. So it's giving you information, but it's not teaching you. The other thing is that this sort of tech relationship really isolates you from potential experiences, which could be positive or negative, but you need to have them. Look back over your relationships and what you've learned from them, the good and the bad. You learned how to be in a healthier relationship by having unhealthy ones, right? With AI, there's no real risk. Your relationship is always going to be positive. Not a lot of learning in that. And when you get into a real relationship, it's not going to feel like that. What if we started comparing? Well, ChatGPT tells me I'm amazing. Sounds crazy, right? But it could happen. I see it happen. I can give you sort of an example from my own patients over the years of multiple patients that I've had that talk about their IRL friends. And the first time I heard that years ago, I went, what do you mean your IRL friends? And they divided their life into the people that they talk to online and their IRL people. Well, what I found with a lot of these people was, and these were all ages, a lot of kids, which was unfortunate, but a lot of these people had multiple online friends, and their IRL people, their in real life people, were only the people like their family. And they didn't develop those other relationships. And a lot of their justifications were kind of like, well, you're old. What do you know? This is how people make friends now. But is it you sitting in a room by yourself in front of the screen, talking to people that you'll never meet? And their argument very often was that they were connected to these people. Okay, that's great. But what about the 12 hours a day of sitting in a dark room and not going outside and staring at a screen and losing your entire sense of self to a game or to words on a screen? And I've seen kids that are 14 with neck problems because of playing video games and being bent over screens. I've seen people incapable of navigating the world. I saw one person and they were homeschooled from the age of, I guess it was about 10. And when it came time for that person to graduate and to get a job and to get a driver's license and to even leave the house, that person had a terrible time. And it took us years to get them into the world again after being out. Is it a matter of fault? Sure. Should the parents have made sure that didn't happen? Of course. But the power that was pulling on that child, those digital relationships basically, were very easy connections, and other connections were harder. If you normalize that, it's not harder, but if you've never done it, it is. So that's kind of an extreme example, but it kind of tells you what can happen when people connect to a digital world, a technological world, versus a world of humans and screens and experiences. Some of the most well adjusted children I've known in my life are children whose parents take them places and have experiences with them. And I'm not talking about Disney, I'm talking about take them out into the world and they walk together and they have experiences together and they're not sitting in front of screens of any type for more than a certain amount a day. So I'm going to ask you to think about that right now. I want you to think about the amount of time you're spending on a screen. Not that you're sitting around talking with ChatGPT for 4 hours. I don't think that's happening with most of us. But I do think that we're spending an inordinate amount of time depending on such things instead of depending on human connection and experience. So I'm going to challenge you right now. What's your screen time? How much in a day time are you spending on any of this? And I want you to think about it. Be honest. We're not going to count work. Work doesn't count. But if we're on social media for a few hours a day, if we're on TV for a few hours, I am hearing so frequently that people are saying 4 to 6 hours a day. That is tragic. If your number is 4 to 6 hours, I want you to think about what you could be doing instead. Connection and experience. Okay. So, does all of that time, counter argument, 4 to 6 hours a day, maybe, does that time leave you inspired? Is it working for you? Is it feeling great? If it is, so maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think it's the best use of our time and our humanness. So what's the takeaway from that part of the conversation? The takeaway is that the way that we grow and develop in our brains is by neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to change itself and to grow with new experiences and connections. So I think as a personal value, we should all be thinking about that. How are we out there having experiences and connecting and growing? That's a growth mindset. We've talked about that before. We want a growth mindset. So if you are sitting on ChatGPT and asking questions, are you growing? Sure. Maybe if you're learning something about an animal you're curious about or asking about how to improve self-esteem and it gives you some tips, but not a relationship with it, just a conversation. We grow because we challenge ourselves, not because we stay safe. So, why can't you use it for therapy? Why do you have to come to a therapist? Of course, I'm going to answer that question. What can't it do that connection does with therapists or with people? It can't push your limits. It can't call you out. It can't notice your progress over time. And it can't sit with you in your emotions and understand what you feel. And most importantly, it can't provide an accurate mirror to who you are. Have you ever had a friend or a person in your life that just always told you how amazing you were no matter what? That's great. We should all have that. But what we really need is the person who says, what are you doing? Is this good for you? AI will never do that. AI will reinforce and tell you how amazing you are. We all need that. We all need to hear that. But we also need the truth. This is what therapy does. This is what healthy relationships do. If you are coming to me and sitting on my couch and you come in and you're an absolute disaster, and I look at you and say, Have you even had a shower for a couple of days? What is going on? I can challenge you and I can make you better. That's what we do for each other. That's what connection is. Connection is I see you and I know you, and I'm going to help you be better, and you're going to help me be better. And we're going to have a relationship based on us trying to be really good and trying to be ourselves. So we fear difficult conversations. That's why I believe that AI has risen to this therapy and companionship role for people. We fear difficult conversations. We don't want to talk about certain things. And I want you to think about, why are we so embarrassed to be vulnerable? Why are we so afraid of asking a question that people might think something weird about us? Why is the inside of my thigh itching? Okay, well, go to urgent care. Don't ask AI, right? So, but we have all of these kind of weird fears about being seen as less than, being vulnerable. So I believe that's why AI has risen to that role of therapy and companion, is because we don't feel comfortable having those questions asked to other humans. That's my issue. Central to all of this. Why aren't we talking to each other? And what are we afraid of? Because most of us have deep, dark questions inside of us. Most of us have things we want to understand about the world. And I want you to ask all kinds of sources: AI, friends, do your own research. I want you to learn, but I don't want you to learn from one source. Okay. So, what can using AI or any technology of this type, what can it do to your brain? What does it do that could hurt you? So basically, our brain is a muscle. Our brain needs to be used. It's not a muscle technically, that's figuratively, but it's something that has to be used. The more that we use our brains, the better off we are. There were studies done on nuns and why nuns had less dementia and why nuns were living longer. And the reason was because they were actively connected till the end of their lives. They were teachers, they were social as part of groups associated with churches. Nuns lived longer because they were connected to groups of people and they had value and they used their brains. So, all that being said, the damage of sitting in front of a screen is that you're not going to be as lucky as the nuns. You're not out there growing yourself. You're not out there having experiences and being connected. It actually is attributed to a longer life. They found that one of the longest lifespans in the world is a group of men on an island who happen to have very powerful roles throughout their lives in the community. So it's been proven your connection makes your life better, but it can also make you healthier. Think about the ways that we've lost sort of this brain power over the years. And this is kind of speaking to my Gen Xers a little bit. The advent of calculators. We weren't allowed to use calculators in school, right? I'm going to sound like an old person, bear with me. But calculators were, pulled out at certain times. Now our phones have a calculator. Nobody adds anything anymore. But I was sitting with someone the other day and I was doing an equation about money over time and weeks, and I just whipped it out of my brain. And the person looked at me and they were like, "How did you do that?" I was like, "Oh, I guess it's kind of what we had to do before calculators." So I learned a lot of little tricks of how to multiply things over time. And I thought, do people learn that now? Maybe not, because your phone is right there. Now, I am going to go back to my calculator and make sure I'm correct, but it's an essential skill I think that I have, which is pretty useful. And the other one is spell check, right? This is a big one of people of my generation, is that we did not have spell check, right? We had to do just everything. You had to use your dictionary or whatever you needed to do. Um, but now, everything is automatically corrected. And what I have found that in the writing that I do, I am losing my spelling skills. There are a couple of words that I get wrong every time because it just comes back in and corrects it for me. So is it the I before E in there, right? Things like that are lost skills because we have these sort of technological things that are helping us along. We want things to help us along, but the other side of it is do we lose skills as a result, right? Now, if I can't spell perfectly or I need a calculator, it's not the end of the world. But if I'm using technology to connect to the world, that's a skill I shouldn't lose. I shouldn't lose the ability to talk to people and be vulnerable with others. The other part of this is that there's a lot of backlash about college students using AI right now. And looking at this, there were so many articles about what is plagiarism and what is the damage of AI use among college students. And there was a lot in there, but what I took away from it was this person never really learns a thing. They basically can go to a chatbot and they can have AI create something for them. If your project is read and analyze this poem, well, you can just find that and hand it in. And have you learned anything? Have you developed the skill of critical thinking? I remember when I was in college, I had a professor and he was amazing. And I turned in an assignment and I was always the A student and I got a C. And this was my first year of undergrad and I was petrified. And I thought, what on earth did I do? And I went up to him and I said, Doctor, why did I get a C? And he said, there's no critical thinking here. And I didn't even know what he meant. I was 17. And he said, don't just read the Shakespeare and spit back to me what it says. I want you to read it and tell me what you think about it. And that blew my mind. And I remember it all these years later. And what he was trying to teach the 17-year-old me was to be a critical thinker, to take something and use me as an instrument to decide what I felt about it and then write about it. If you're using AI as a college student, you're not looking within for the answers. You're not developing that part of yourself. You're just writing an answer and copy and pasting it, right? You're writing an answer, but you didn't write it. Now, you could look at that from an ethical standpoint. Well, that's not right. But I think about it from a workforce standpoint. If I hire a therapist at my practice who chat GPT'd her way through her program, what's she going to do when she's sitting in front of a patient and doesn't have an answer and can't look it up? That's a really easy example. But think about that in all types. Think about your job and all that you had to learn to be there. What if other people didn't really do the learning and they're working next to you? Some jobs that could be pretty dangerous, right? So it's it's the reduction of critical thinking and the idea of cognitive effort that we lose when we go for the easy answer. So think about that, critical thinking and cognitive effort. Who uses those skills? The smartest people, the people who are doing cool stuff, right? You're one of those people more than likely. Are you using those skills and keeping them developed? Or are we going for the easy, low hanging fruit of the easy answer? Think about that. George Orwell has a quote, and y'all should know about George Orwell, especially right now. He wrote 1984, where he predicted all these horrible things, that some of which are happening in a different kind of way than he wrote it, but he saw some stuff. And George Orwell said, if a person cannot write well, they cannot think well. And if a person cannot think well, others will do their thinking for them. Horrifying. To me, it's horrifying. But think about that, right? So, are technological improvements good? Sure, absolutely. Think about the automation that happens in factories, right? A lot of people don't have to do dangerous, repetitive tasks anymore. The factories can be automated in the things that we manufacture. That seems like an improvement. But do we want to replace our translators? If you're at the UN and that translator is conveying really important information, do we want a human? Humans can have errors for sure, But humans have cultural context, they have self reflection, and there are safeguards. I don't think we have those things in AI. I don't think we have an accurate cultural context. The AI doesn't understand the world it operates in. It doesn't have safeguards, as we see with the horrible story about the man who ended his life. And it doesn't have self reflection. If I say the wrong thing, I can go home tomorrow, think about it, and come back to that person and correct that thing. AI just speaks to you. There's no self reflection. That's like having a really aggressive friend who always thinks they're right. I don't love that. So, do we want to replace the creatives, the people who come out from their own story and make something? And think about this. Think about somebody like Van Gogh, right? Van Gogh created beautiful art. You can create art using AI. You can. You can say, draw me a picture. We've all seen the weird deep fake stuff on social media. Pretty impressive, some of it. But Van Gogh painted some of those garden scenes from looking out of the window of the mental institution that he was in. And I love that story because it's that idea of this humanity within madness, right? What a great story of human expression. Think about Freud in his time was talking about things no one was talking about, sex and deeper meanings and dreams. And he was out there saying things that people didn't like and people didn't agree with. But he was speaking up from his own feelings and his own experiences and created something that lasts and influences people today. Think about Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote all of those hundreds of years ago about what it felt like to be human. He wrote about love and tragedy and loss. Could AI create that? Sure, but it wouldn't be based on those things as real experiences. Think about somebody like Frederick Douglass, a freed slave who went out on the road and talked about his experiences, spoke to people, wrote books, created social change based on his experience of being a slave and then escaping. AI could write those stories, but could it stand up in front of you as Frederick Douglass and tell you about them? No. Humanity is the missing piece here. The reality of what you bring as a human, as a flawed human with experiences, is so much more important than the story that you get from a machine that recognizes patterns. So the book recommendation this time is one that kind of shows both sides of the story because I'm giving you the fear-based kind of cautionary tale about AI. But this one gives you a little bit of the history of it if you want to dig a little deeper and talks about the potential ramifications, positive and negative. And there's some philosophical stuff in there. And also one of the people that wrote the book is related to Google and part of the development of some contemporary AI. So the book is called The Age of AI by Henry Kissinger. Yes, that one. Eric Schmidt and Daniel Huttenlocker. And it says that it is the age of AI and our human future. So I like that. They're not just talking about it from the standpoint of this is great technology. They're kind of asking those questions about how does it weave in to the future of humanity? Because let's face it, AI is changing things. Maybe for the better in some ways, maybe for the worse. But the book examines all of the pieces of that. So think about where you get your answers from. Think about the voice that is speaking to you and use these tools if they support you. I'm still going to ask Alexa what the weather is today, but I'm not going to ask Alexa Plus, the new generative AI Alexa, about how to be a better person. I'm not going to do that, and I hope you don't either. We have people in the world that are designed to help when you can't ask a difficult question. People like me, like therapists, but also the people around you. And if you look at the people around you and think, I can't be vulnerable, I can't ask them these things, let me ask AI. I want you to think about why you can't. I want you to think about why you don't. And how cool would it be to have your own chat GPT in a person that you could come home that night and say, did you like this outfit I had on today? I don't know if it expressed what I wanted to express. What do you think it expresses? Right? Or you could say, um, tell me what you believe is important about how to find happiness, and hear what somebody else has to say. So don't let it replace connection. So if you are having full out conversations with an AI, you are shaping your brain in ways that probably are not the best way to maximize your quality of life. So I hope that this gave you some things to think about. I hope you learned something new. And I hope that you really think about how you're getting connection. That's the mission here, human connection. We all need it. It's part of what keeps us alive and thriving. And it's part of what makes life beautiful. And where are you getting that connection? From a trusted source, a human, or from a screen? And think about that balance. You can do both, but make sure the balance stays on the human side. So for now, my sunshines, I hope you get outside in the sun. I hope that you walk with humans in the sun. And until next time, I will see you then. Take care of yourselves. Bye.